This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Political signals. This is where we are, this is where we are not. Professor Gitile Naitule is a former NCIC commissioner and a fellow National Academy, a fellow at the Kenya National Academy of Science, and joins us this morning. Prof, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Good to have you in the hot seat.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Dennis, we welcome you with today's proverb first.
Yeah, our proverb today comes from the coastal areas of the continent, right? And this one talks about palm trees. And it says, there are no shortcuts to the top of the palm trees. If you want to get to the top, start from
Beginning.
the bottom.
You can't start from the top. You just start from the beginning. And when you come to the end, you stop. That is from Alice in Wonderland. So it simply means that shortcuts don't deliver anything. They are just that. Shortcuts to nothing. So you need to be able to follow the procedures. You need to be able to begin nicely. You need to be able to invest for proper returns. It's a good proverb.
Yeah.
We just talked about procedures, processes, and investing for proper returns to come.
Yeah.
We'll talk about processes and procedures, and especially 2027 elections and how we're heading there.
Absolutely. The words litmus test, dress rehearsal, show of the times to come, all of these buzzwords then became something over the last couple of months, and then into the by-election. And then the by-elections happen around the country. Some people are going to court, others are still disgruntled. There's a bitter taste in the mouths of very many. But the country as a whole is looking into 2027, and we're trying to figure out what that pulse is. You've written some interesting things. We'll get into that in just a minute. But just give us an overview, Prof, from what we saw last week and where the country is going. What would you say, or how would you say Kenya's heart is currently beating?
I think what we saw, what happened last week, does not augur well for the country, for peace and the stability of Kenya. There was open bribery of voters, open. Nobody was trying to hide it. And then there was open police bias. And then there was an IEBC that didn't even bother to pretend to be impartial. Now, when you put all those things together, then the country needs prayers, because that is really deadly. But of course, there was also another message there. And the message is the Kenyans have nearly fed up with the government.
Oh.
Because I think the total number of elected positions were 27.
Yeah.
17, opposition won 17 of those. And then the government won 8, together with the ODM.
Yeah.
And the ones they won razor thin in areas where they won 100% in the previous election. It shows that the government is facing a very tough re-election campaign. If you take Mbere, for example, in the 2022 election, the candidate who is now the minister got that 4,000 votes. Opposition, you combined, and only 2,000. So you can imagine that was an overwhelming vote for UNDA, because he was in TP but supporting UNDA. Now, in the last election, the difference was 400 about 400 votes, or 400 something votes. That should tell you how much confidence has been eroded. I mean, the confidence in the states, in the government, in the UNDA which they elected. Now, if you look at Malaba, it's nearly the same thing. The difference was 1,000 votes. With all the investment, you see, what you need to check is the amount of money spent. If what they say about the money is correct, then it means that they spent 15 million per single vote which they received. That is heavy expenditure, and then the returns are almost negligible. So what he's telling us is the opposition can win the next election. All they need is to organize and capitalize on the discontent because it's widespread. Because all the areas we have mentioned were the areas which were fully behind the UNDA, fully, 100%. And now there isn't a lot to write home about, because when you lose 50% of your supporters in 3 years, in 2 years, you're probably going to lose 70 to 80%, if not 100%.
But Prof, when you talk about the elections that we've just experienced, we call it the 2025 elections, there is the question that if this is a litmus test of what is to come in 2027, you look at the elections as a process. So you look at IEBC, voter bribery that you've talked about. IEBC is silent. You talk about the same voter bribery, and the police and the bias that you talk about, the police have been silent. In other areas, you find that there has been violence that you've experienced. People have died. IEBC has been silent. Talk about an impartial IEBC, you know. And one asks the question, if this is just happening in 2025, there is fear that you might see worse in 2027. And if that is the case, then what is the solution? How should we deal with that?
Yes, because I think the impartiality about the NBC, you can forget about that. They demonstrated they're not impartial.
Oh, really?
They demonstrated they are fully behind the executive. They're actually part of the executive. So they're not an impartial referee. And now they even committed the crimes. I think the people who are involved in these elections, they need to hold the chairman of IEBC criminally liable for gazetting illegal names, for clearing an non-existent person to run for an election. And then not just clearing, allowing them to breach the Elections Act by voting by someone who is not in the register. Voting, you know, that's a misrepresentation. That's a criminal offense. So what you are looking here is an IEBC that is either completely incompetent, but also it explains how they were recruited. How are they recruited? Remember, there were 2 lists. There was a proper, what you can call, if you like, a proper shortlisting. Then there was another unjacked shortlisting. And then it turned out in the process of confirmation, some didn't even apply, but they found their way into that body. What is happening here, that's why I say in Kenya we will need, if there was a time when we need the prayers to peacefully go over this, it is now. Because when you have body so captured, a referee so captured, people are walking into the election with a referee they don't trust. You see what we saw happening with the police. When there is violence in any election, like for example, Malaba, people are invaded in their own homes and beaten. An independent IEBC should have cancelled that election immediately, because you can't hold the election under those circumstances. When we saw something similar to military vehicles in Mbere, the moment those vehicles appear, IEBC is supposed to suspend that election, because once an electoral area is declared, all the police in that area becomes officials of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. They are no longer taking their command from the chief of the police. They become officials. They become officials of IEBC. But you see, they were looking as people are being harassed, as people are being beaten. So, as what I'm saying, what we saw, you see, this was the big opportunity for IEBC to demonstrate that they can be an independent and impartial referee.
Right.
And they failed miserably.
And that they could drop the stain of IEBCs in the past.
Exactly.
This is interesting because you also mention in this article that you've written, the by-election mirage, why Ruto's claim of momentum is built on sand. And in the first paragraph there, at the end of it, you said it was a desperate performance by a regime trying to mask the erosion of its legitimacy. So there are many things happening here concurrently. There's legitimacy being sought. There is also masking of then something which you don't want people to see. What's that?
Well, what they don't want people to see is they have actually failed to deliver. Okay? They are trying to say, I still have support. You see, if you still have support, maybe you have delivered something. So they worked too hard to show that. They, and this IEBC again, allowed cabinet secretaries to openly campaign. The Speaker of the National Assembly openly campaigning. I mean, this, if we normalize, there's erosion of rule of
the
law.
deputy president.
Well, deputy president can campaign.
He can,
But not the cabinet secretary.
Yeah.
And also not the Speaker of the National
Assembly. Okay.
Assembly. So what we have done here, and that's why people mustn't go to court. Because you cannot normalize breach of law, opening breach of law by the people we trust to uphold the law. People actually sworn in upholding the law. So that is what they are doing. They are masking the fact that they didn't deliver, because, I mean, when you, in a short time as 3 years, and you are losing 50 to 60%, and even that 50%, we are merely saying they had it, because they really didn't have it. If the heavy artillery, they directed, you see, if the campaign was normal, totally normal, peaceful, people allowed to make proper choices without bribery, without violence, and then they got that 50%, then you can say, okay, the 50% still don't believe in you. But it's very clear when you look at what was invested and the nature of the campaign, and then you look at the outcome, and you realize that it's very likely these guys could not have gotten even 2,000 votes.
You know, Prof, there's a lot that has been said that the president, we've heard him say that saizi si mambo ya kupiga siasa, saizi wakati wa kupiga kazi. But you read what the president is saying vis-a-vis what his officers are doing, and one asks the question, this is doublespeak. Why would the president be having doublespeak? Because when you see cabinet secretaries, his executive members, campaigning, yet at the same time saying saizi ni wakati wa kufanya kazi, seems as though the president does not know where to step on or where to stand. But while at that, we know what bodies like NCIC ought to have done, because remember when exchanges of words between the former deputy president and the deputy president and Dakuvua nguo wewe and all these statements, and one asks the question, why do we have bodies that ought to deliver on certain objectives but don't do that? Why do we have an NCIC that one would say the toothless dog is not speaking? You look at what EACC has done. We've given a report, this individual is not fit to run for office. But then again, they're cleared to run for office anyway. What are we doing as a country?
First, any body with the authority to guide us, which has been given by the law and the Constitution, is as good as the people you put there. You see, the problem the country is facing, it did not start with William Ruto. It started with Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta hired the commissioners before he had advertised. And he hired purely based on loyalty. You know, we say Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, the president wasn't hiring anybody. His officers, you know, the people who are in charge of that hiring, the officers, the people. You know, in the government, what's so interesting is for example, no one, maybe I shouldn't mention the names, but you have people in the ministries who are so powerful. They select, they make the list, and they take to the president for signature. Of course, you can't do that, Ruto, because Ruto is very particular. He checks everything himself. But Uhuru Kempelege here and aside, he wasn't interested to find who is it again and all that. Now, these people are hiring you based purely. Are you loyal to us? Okay, it's not that can you do the job, because it's like NCIC doesn't exist. Even the ethics, what are they doing? Because they couldn't be involved in some of these things. You see, even when the president says Irundiro with Nguns, you know, you are challenged to ask what is he really saying, because only the government can have Nguns. You see, the work of the Kenya police is to prevent crime which has not occurred.
Yes.
And to apprehend the people when they commit crimes. Where does citizens, individuals have the power to organize goons? Where is the police Where is the National Intelligence Service? Where is the entire government apparatus? By the time we organize the goons, they will arrest you even before you start. So if you see goonism culture coming in, it's because the government is sponsoring the goons. The police is looking away because the government is only entity with the capacity to basically break the law and then get scot-free.
But for what purpose? I imagine that if you think about it, if you were met by a goon, you're in the city during the democratic exercise like voting, and they came and they, took apart a particular operation, it's not something that you would remember fondly. You wouldn't imagine it fondly. And if then folks, the likes of Professor Naituli, are telling you that these are government-sponsored goons, in what reality would it be that I would adhere myself to a government who put me in that position? Because one would imagine that goons are used for a particular purpose. And if that purpose is to quell somebody or to get somebody on their side, how possible is it that I would harbor positive thoughts towards such a government?
What is happening here is what is called weaponization of poverty. These people are not even paying a lot of money, like 1,000 or 500.
Even less from what we hear.
Even less. But you see now they become effective because the police look the other way. The police can stop it, but they imagine if the government doesn't want this stopped, they can risk their jobs. They can, they can get harassed later and so on. So they look the other way. If police in the polling day, the polling is very well manned by the Kenya police. And if the police are allowed to do their job properly, they won't do it properly. They are trained. They know their job. They know their job is to make sure there is peace in the voting, that every Kenyan is protected. Okay, but when they know they have been instruction to interfere na hii, your job is on the line. So they protect them. This is how the state decays. This is how a state becomes a banana republic. Because when the law enforcers are tied, people blame the police very unfairly. Extremely unfairly. They're
doing what they've been asked to do, is what you're saying.
Well,
the police are behaving.
Sometimes they are not even being asked. Signals are sent that this is how the system wants things to move. So if you interfere to your own risk. Sometimes you are not even. They won't even come and tell you. They send signals. Okay, I mean, assuming look, when the minister comes with those goons, what is the police are supposed to do? This is the guys only to uphold the constitution and defend it, and they work according to the law. But he is with them. Police do what? These are just innocent Kenyans trying to survive like you and me. So the problem is the command. You solving this problem, you need to look at the command. That is where the problem lies. Because you see, when they allow this culture now to become normal. I mean, do you really think the Kenya police will go and throw tear gas in a church? Why?
But they did.
For? Yeah, they did. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
They won't. They are told to do it.
On their own, they wouldn't do it, is what you're saying.
Yes, they wouldn't do it.
But then one must question, if you're saying they're just ordinary citizens like everybody else, one must question that position against a statement in this article that you made, where you said in 2027, Ruto will face a nationwide electorate whose patience has thinned and whose expectations have sharpened. The economic pain is real and the hunger is visceral. The disillusionment is widespread. So that means it has spread, not just you and I or the people or somebody who is plying their trade, even to these police that you talk about.
Even to them.
So wouldn't it be a situation whereby they're tired as being used as guns for hire across board? Is it not everybody?
It is. And you see, that's why I said weaponization of poverty. Because if there is something the president has done very successfully, he has spread misery very fairly, okay, to nearly everyone in equal measure. So the police like you, they are having the same economic experiences. They are also paying SHA. They are also paying all this, because if you try now to calculate taxes by January, 49.25% would have been going into tax from your salary. The police are also subject to the same thing.
They are.
You understand? So what it is, though, is when people are being reduced to nothing, okay, they tend to sort of defend the little that they're having. So don't expect a policeman to make an independent decision to obstruct a goon operation, because that will work against the person. Okay? So, there is this idea that it's an interesting story. There's a Vladimir Lenin, the guy, the Russian revolution.
Lenin, yeah.
He came with a chicken into the political bureau, the Politburo, and he removed the feathers very roughly. The chicken cried and he cried, pain. He started bleeding all over. And then he threw it to the ground. And then it started to throw grain into it. Eventually, he started defending it from his hand. You see, first he made it suffer miserable. And then now he reduced it to a beggar. You understand? So this is basically what is happening with the policies we are making. We are making policies stripping Kenyans naked completely. And then eventually, they may very well behave like the Vladimir Lenin chicken.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Professor, is that where Kenyans find themselves? Because you look at it in terms of the anti-finance bill protest, where Kenyans have come out, they have said, no, we do not want this. They're beaten, they're killed on the streets. Come 2025, Kenyans again go to commemorate the same, and they're beaten. Kenyans are killed. It's a repetition of the same. You come to the 2025 by-elections, and you find Kenyans again surrounding the very politicians they are saying no to. And again, Kenyans allow themselves to be used as goons to fight fellow Kenyans. How have we turned ourselves to be Vladimir Lenin's chicken?
We have turned ourselves to be exactly that. And it's very unfortunate. But also, you see what happened with the Gen Z uprising, 2024. When Raila crossed over to the government, the opposition, there was no opposition. So the vacuum was created. And Nesha has a vacuum. So these young people occupied that. Now, the opposition right now can actually create the same thing. They can create the same thing, and the 2027 will be very explosive. They can decide there is no opposition. Do you understand? They can actually tone it down even if their campaign so that they don't give a force. If they conclude that the president is determined to steal the election, the best thing for them is now to look like they have surrendered. These young people will come out again. Because now they will realize they don't have a defender. You see, that is why it's very important to build the country and to create peace. You need a believable opposition, a strong opposition. And then a government that can respond to criticism, okay, in terms of correcting it itself. That way stability is maintained because the frustrations are contained. But when the space is left like that, the frustrations boil.
What is a credible opposition? This is the thing, that whether it's coming from the mouth of the president, who's used all kinds of flowery words about the opposition, or whether it's coming from the opposition themselves, what is a credible opposition? What is it that is going to convince Kenyans that you also will not be the chicken who's defeathered in the hands of Vladimir Lenin? How do you convince them that you wouldn't do the same, if not worse?
I think the opposition we can confuse, although I think you ask a very fundamental question, because when you look at the last election had the two candidates who have spent their life fighting for good governance. That was Raila Odinga and Martha Karua, compared to UNDA, and the Kenyans rejected.
Wholesomely.
The proven.
By 200,000 votes, many would argue.
Why 200,000 votes? I agree with you. Because although, of course, if you analyze properly, really, they could easily have won that election.
This is it.
Problem is that they won him before they won, and they didn't bother having agents. They didn't, once you don't have agents in the polling stations, your opponent can do whatever they want with the result at the polling station. So I agree, you can't really accuse the Kenyans. I agree completely of rejecting that ticket. But then that ticket, it should have gotten so much vote that even if you are to manipulate the election, you are never to manipulate.
This is the question, and I think even coming from what Aseto was asked, because this seems to be the quagmire. That on the onset there seems to be a heavy amount of dissatisfaction. The by-election happened on Thursday. Friday, the president was in Nakuru launching this road, and there were thousands of people by the roadside.
No, that one you can't
So
tell me.
if optics are anything, and we know that politically optics are it's perspective, and optics are used a lot of times to cement an idea in people's minds, which is the truth. So if we're saying that Kenyans are dissatisfied, this is what you've said. Kenyans are dissatisfied. Kenyans are disenfranchised. Kenyans are disillusioned, and they're not happy with this status quo. They voted in a particular direction. It was not accepted, but they're being shown something very clearly. Shouldn't it be an everyday thing? The president is convinced that he's doing the right thing. Him and his generals are convinced that the people of Kenya actually want these things that he's not doing.
That is where the president is terribly wrong. What you saw there is a sign of idleness. It's a sign that people have nothing to do. In fact, those crowds should worry the president. He shouldn't be inspired thinking that they are coming because they support him. Everywhere the president is going, people will show up because they are idle. They are not working. It's a working day. See, that day you are saying it's a working day. So if you're going to get that kind of background on a working day and you are the president of the country, what that should tell you? It should tell you these people have nothing else to do. They have come to see the motorcade. They have come to see the president. But I can tell you that doesn't mean it to translate into the vote, because even Moi, when he was president, and a lot of us thought that he wasn't a good president, he always had the ground. Is that time when he didn't have the ground? Uhuru Kenyatta, he undefeated in the first term. Then Jubilee was a failure, honestly. Jubilee, I think what you're having in William Ruto, and just Jubilee on steroids, because really, but where did Uhuru go and you didn't see the ground? Didn't they vote for him when he proposed a candidate? So you can give Kenyans some credit. First, they respected the office of the president, which is very good. They need to respect that office. Number two, they have nothing to do. So if the president is coming here, they will line up. They will go to see the vehicles. They will go to see the president. Then the president sees them because he's not interpreting. These are my people.
The unspoken.
Yes, I'm supposed to be responsible for them. So why is it that they are here on a working day?
So he should be asking himself, rather than glorying in the moment where there are 1,000 people there. What you're saying is that after the day of a by-election where he wants to tell somebody that they've actually won and that they're going in the right direction, he should be questioning and saying, why on Friday at 11 a.m. are thousands of people here looking at me?
Precisely. That's the question which should come to his mind. It's not that they love me. Why are they here? Why are they not in their work? See, the country is a standstill. When you can collect, and I can tell you the president can collect that ground anywhere. Anywhere. He can collect them any day, any time, because we are all idle. 70% are not working. Of these young people, 70.
Prof, you talk about 70% of these young people who are not working, right? And you talk about a population that is being looked upon pretty much in the next election to go out there and vote. But as they go there, the 2025 elections have already shown where IEBC stands. That we also have a police unit, right, that chooses to look the other way. But as we go to 2027, question is, can IEBC reclaim itself and prove to Kenyans that they can deliver? And if not, What does that mean to
Actually, I
2027
doubt-
elections?
I doubt they can reclaim themselves because I'm beginning to think they don't have capacity
Where?
for reclaiming themselves. So if I was leading the opposition, I would demand that we hire new people because the country is too important to surrender to these fellows who have already demonstrated that they just don't have the capacity. How do you clear somebody? You see, Article 99A insists that for you to be an MP, to run for MP, you must be a registered voter. That under number one. How do you go over that one and clear somebody who is not a registered voter? How do you then also supervise that person to commit a crime of misrepresentation? So these people are not competent. I think this is a question of competence here. Because also the way they are recruited was wrong. Even I think the architecture of Article 88 is not right. The president should be completely divorced from recruitment of IEBC. And it's easy to do that. You see, you can set up a body like the Judicial Service Commission now, the way it operates. And that body, once it advertises, interviews, it sends the name to the president. The president has no choice but to appoint those names. You see, as it is right now, the president set up the panel.
Yes.
Okay? So if the president sets up the panel, he tells you, he can also send you the list of the people you are supposed to assist during the interview. Do you understand that? I mean, sometimes we behave too naively as a country. The president is a participant in the election,
Elections.
but he sets up the recruitment panel alone. And then you saw what was happening there. The parliament, the parties actually nominated
members.
their members. ODM nominated and the UDA nominated because it was kind of an agreement between the late Raila Odinga and the President Ruto. But these are not the only participants in the election. Do you understand? So sometimes the way we do things...
There are at least 1,400 and something more.
The way we do things. So there's opposition, there's still time. They should insist that you disband the whatever left of this IEBC. You create a new one. If they fail to do that, then they should go for criminal liability over the by-elections on the chairman and the CEO. And they leave the other commissioners alone. Just go after those two because they committed crime.
There's also an opportunity to really test the judiciary here. Oftentimes we forget that the judiciary is an arm of government. It is not the, I keep saying, it's not the abandoned stepsister in the attic somewhere. It's an arm of government to keep in check quite a number of things as well. Because often, Prof, it's as though we say these things. We say, yes, there must be criminal liability. There must be prosecutorial questions brought. There must be interrogation of this process. And if somebody is found culpable, that person or those persons then must pay for what they've done. It sounds damning when we say it. And it sounds like we hold some kind of gravitas and authority when we make those proclamations. But the process that is required for that to happen is often where we have a problem. People don't obey court orders. There's a law, for God's sake, that the cabinet secretaries should have remembered that they cannot do this during an election, but that's ignored. The Speaker of the National Assembly is a non-partisan member of government. It is very clear the position that he should have taken. But so these are suggestions. It's like somebody says, do you want an orange or a banana? And you're just kind of like,
would you like to have?
Yeah. But this is the law that requires you to do a certain thing. So when we say this and an election has taken place, people have already gloried in a victory or people have already, been miserable in a loss. And so we are saying that who is going to be responsible for making sure that these wrongs are righted? If that's a word, let's make it up and go. Okay.
I think the Kenyans are the one who have to be responsible. I'll correct something more. The judiciary is not an arm of government. Our constitution sets up 3 branches of government.
It's a branch of government, yes.
It's a branch of government.
Yeah.
So it sets up 3: executive, judicial, and legislation. And they're supposed to, the concept is to introduce what is called checks and balances.
But
so
there's not one that's above the other.
Yes, exactly.
There's not one, they're on the same level.
So the problem Kenyans have found is to have a proper parliament. Parliament, in fact, has more power than the executive.
Yes.
The parliament can, for example, right now, remove the president for violation of law. All those ministers who went to campaign, they can be impeached tomorrow for that, for campaigning, because that's a violation of law. But then the Kenyans don't have parliament. They don't have proper parliament because they have not elected good people, patriotic people who love their country, people are completely nationalistic, people who can defend the Kenya's interest, who can defend the constitution, and that means defending the people of Kenya. So it is the parliament, the weakest link in the management of Kenya is parliament. And that is why Kenya may very well end up becoming a banana republic, because what you just said is when the executive ignores court orders, parliament can enforce. You see what happened in Korea? The Korean president illegally declared martial law. Yeah. But parliament convenes and it removes him from office because that was an illegal act.
Prof, you know, you've just...
I'm laughing because I'm wondering who here.
You know, Prof, you've just brought in something that is very critical. We keep saying on this show that the greatest office that Kenyans have in this country is not even the executive.
No,
it is parliament.
It's parliament.
It is parliament. That means if Kenyans decided to scrutinize each and every single person who wants to run for member of parliament and give them express orders on how they want to be represented, perhaps we will have a country, or we'll have a parliament that will steer this country to where it ought to go. Because if a president jokes around and does not respect the law, disrespects court orders, parliament can sanction him. If cabinet secretaries decide to play outside the rules, they can sanction them and fire them at any given time. It therefore calls upon Kenyans to critically think of people it puts in the National Assembly and the MCAs to just fix this country and steer us the way we want to go.
Exactly. I think you really need to congratulate the judiciary. Under the 2010 architecture, judiciary has stood firm. I mean, there may be a few lapses here and there, but the judiciary is the only thing holding this country together right now in the terms of 3 arms of government. You can persistently argue that you simply don't have a parliament. I mean, you saw what happens in 2024 during Gen Z protest. They insisted that there will be even no comma in passing the finance bill, and they passed it.
Right.
And then when things went south, the president, some of them, then they clapped when the president told them what you have done is useless. And then he is telling them in his house, in his state house. So our weakest link for governance, for proper governance,
is parliament.
It is parliament.
But I have to ask why. Because before, if you have conversations with individuals who go into parliament prior to the entry into parliament, these are people who are on. They're switched on. They're switched on. Some of them are professionals in their own right. They're switched on. But I'm convinced that there's something somebody is either injecting, or there's some water
sniffing
that's being drunk, or something. Yes, because how is it possible that you can change and do a 360, in this case 180, right? On positions that you held before? You convinced people you were going to legislate budget oversight for them, but then you go and you go and do it for another employee. Essentially, you go do it for another employee. What happens? Or is it that people were always that way? If we're saying parliament is actually the weakest link in governance in Kenya today, across board, because we're saying a by-election that may have been a sham because of an IEBC that doesn't operate, the controller of budget is talking today about half a trillion shillings in pending bills that could cripple the economy. Parliament could fix that if it did oversight. We're also talking about people who are going to other countries and then they be duped, and then they're on the front lines. Parliament can actually fix that, can censure a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a prime cabinet secretary to come and actually do your job. All of these things rest in the hands of this house. So how do you convince Kenyans that these people that you vote for every cycle are actually there to do this thing, because it falls right at their doorstep?
You know, you ask a really an important question, and maybe the Kenyans, hopefully they can listen to that question, because you are saying, how do we convince them? How do we convince them? Because you see, they live with these people, they are part of us, And they are the ones who give us some people who dropped out of school. Then go to parliament, because dropping out of school means you are not a consistent worker. You see what when you sustain yourself in school until you graduate or you finish high school properly, it's also some level of commitment and discipline. They won't give you anybody. Some people, wash fellows, these Kenyans, and the parliament started going wrong, by the way, from 2013. It has never always been like this. You have to remember there was time parliament was parliament.
Parliament, yeah.
It andikina Madhagarua, the parliament andikina Koigi wa Mwere, Mashengo wa Mwashovi, Sifule wa Shuma, serious Kenyans. Now what has happened over the years, if you follow, is only actually Luo Nyanza that elect intelligent people. That's why they always look like they are the ones in the opposition. Almost permanently.
What do you mean by that, Prof?
No, they elect clever people.
Okay. Nobody else does?
No, the other Kenyans don't. Like, for example, if you look at the central Kenya, we elect the worst. We elect business people. For example, in the Mount Kenya region, I think is the worst. In sending quite fairly useless people to that Mpuke. But can you compare them, for example? This guy, before he became the minister, he was very effective. There's Obion Rai, for example. Even in John Mbandi. When you look at what comes out of Luo Nyanza in terms of members of parliament, is probably the best. And always, not once or twice, they always progressively give us the best legislators. The rest of the country gives us very interesting characters. The question now you're asking, and is very fundamental, how do we convince these people that please, when you are electing, give us people who can protect you? Because what you are doing, you are electing, you are advocating.
And yet, sorry, Prof, but in other sectors, we're able to do that really well. If Dennis Aseto presented himself before a panel at the Standard Group, for example, and said that, you know what, you need to hire me because I can actually report, I can read the news, and I can conduct interviews. The only way you're going to be able to test that is when he does it.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do it, you remove him.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, there's even
But why can't we do?
There's even a clause in the constitution.
But we never activate it.
No, Parliament has refused to give strength to that constitutional provision, because you have to do it to give strength to it. In fact, the court has tried to create a path for RICO, and I think that clause will run up if it is properly enforced. But also, we have introduced a band culture. We have made money the only thing that defines you are worthy. Now, usually clean people who can present you, they are not thieves, because most people who have money in Kenya, most have actually stolen it. Because the way you get money in Kenya, you either work with the government or trained with the government. There is nobody who has discovered a computer here or a program, a new product. So if you analyze all the Kenyan, 125 of them, because if you are aware, 125 Kenyans own the wealth of 42.7 million of us. In other ones, they collect the money that 125 people are controlling in Kenya. is 42.5 million when we have 50 million. So you can imagine that level. Okay, that level of dominance. Now, if you investigate those 125, it may be 1 or 2 or 3 people who have started an industry and genuine business, which they have made money. The rest are either trended with the government, inflated contracts, tenders, inflated tenders, okay? Outright theft. I mean, you got the case of this Mudhende guy stealing from Kenyatta Hospital, okay? And then changing the name, and then people of Mbere giving him a vote, because you can't tell me they didn't give him some vote. They actually didn't give him vote. When they give him vote, they knew ethics was after him. They knew the reasons for changing the name, but they still. So what it is here is civic education. We require civic education extensively, but I don't know when it can be done.
But Prof, civic education is needed. There is also the fact that the agencies that ought to work need to work. There is also the need for that clause to be given power.
Yeah.
How do we give that clause power if the body that is supposed to give it power to come with policies that will give it the power to operate has refused to do that?
No.
How will Kenyans take advantage of that clause that has been given to them by the Constitution?
2027 is coming. Ask the Kenyans to take advantage of 2027 and getting good people to Bunge, but also asking good people to offer themselves. Because another thing is the middle class. We are always afraid of going there because we are misunderstood. I mean, like in my constituency, I can give you an example of my constituency. There was a candidate with a PhD. There's another one who has nothing because he dropped out of school. They elected that one who was. So you see, people avoid that humiliation because these Kenyans are not going to understand you. Now, I'm hoping that the misery they're experiencing, they understand the value of parliament. They understand the value of the MCA. You can see, for example, in Mero, because Mero has got the most educated MCAs in the country. 90% of them have a university degree. You can see how they took on the government and removed.
Yes.
Do you understand? Because of the stock of education. Now, park parliament with good educated Kenyans and also moral Kenyan. People are not going there to make money, but they are going there to serve. Now, if the country can do that in 2027, then we begin to see light at the end of the tunnel.
Indeed.
Because the country has resources, plenty of resources. It is the greed that is spreading poverty. It's not because this country is poor.
It's not because Kenya is poor, but it is the greed that is spreading poverty. Professor Gitile Naituli has also said, pack parliament with educated, focused people. That should be your goal. You were asking for what next? Pack parliament with educated and resourceful people who want to actually make a difference. That's what you need. That's what you need to do.
Yes.
And we're asking what then? That's it. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. It's a minute past 8 o'clock. Professor Gitile Naituli is the former NCIC commissioner, as well as a fellow at the Kenya National Academy of Science. Asante Sana for being here this morning. These are the conversations we have. We'll continue after 8. It's a minute past 8. Good morning.
The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spike.